Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Option Menu Crew podcast. Your crew members today are myself, Ryan, and Ed's with us today as well.
Yeah, I'm here. This is actually a topic that I requested. So maybe I should be the one to introduce it. But I've been thinking a lot about used games. How they continue to exist in this day and age, even with the proliferation of digital distribution. Um, kind of like the ethics of how it impacts the gaming industry. Um, how it works from a preservation standpoint. I just think it's a topic that we might talk about now, but maybe in 5-10 years nobody will be talking about. So I don't know how you want to get started, but
Yeah, there's a lot
I
to cover.
know.
Sorry,
Go ahead.
there's a lot to cover when it comes to this, and it's going to overlap with a lot of stuff that we've talked about before, monetization, series of episodes, and so on and so forth. So, yeah, you wanted to talk about used games. We've been having a bunch of hot debates about used games, and actually, you just made a recent big trade-in, didn't you?
Oh, I traded in my PlayStation 4 because I got the PS5.
Mm.
That was not a used games, but that was a used games console. I don't always keep stuff around if I don't need it. I have some games that I keep. I've traded in some games, and sometimes I've regretted trading in a game and actually bought it again. So I the cycle is something that I participate in.
Yeah, that's funny. Oh, and I was also thinking of a friend of mine. He recently acquired a Switch OLED because he actually saw one out in the wild just on a store shelf, and he's like, I can't pass that up. So he bought it, and then he went and traded in his old Switch plus a couple other games, and he got like, I think he told us $280 he paid for it. So yeah, he ended up basically paying for most of what he wanted with just by trading in stuff. And that's we're gonna get more into the reasons why like people trade in and things like that. But to start off, Ed, what's your current policy on physical games and trading them in and used games?
Um, I lately I've just I haven't traded in that many games. I have in the past, but like I said, I've had some that I've regretted. So I've kind of been off of that cycle. These days, if I trade in a game, it's probably going to be because I want to buy it digital. Because I have some Switch games that I kind of wish I had digital. Like, you and I and the other friends play Super Smash,
Hmm.
and I am finding that I don't want to swap out the cart for something like that. I kind of like having a physical copy for games that a single player and series that I enjoy. Like, I think you gave me a ribbing last week for all my Metroid Dread drama, but I'm
Hmm.
I'm happy to have gotten the physical, the special edition of that. I'm happy to have a physical copy of that. But it's kind of like I might have that card in while I'm playing it, but if we want to go and play a multiplayer game, I don't want to have to swap out the card. So like but as far as used games go, um, I don't really buy them that often these days. If I'm buying a used game, it's probably because it's an older generation. Like I've bought some, like this year, I bought a couple. I think I bought like one DS game that I was interested in that I just got used. So sometimes I'll this be an old, and I guess part of this is I do like owning games. So some of these games I've bought, I could find a way to emulate or download on my 3DS. I do have a one with custom firmware. So, but I do like owning games, and that's part of the reason I like the physical market, which does include used games. Um, so it's funny the the conversation of used games really is tightly coupled to the existence of physical as a distribution method. And I know you're big on digital. Do you really buy any physical games these days? I know. I guess you're big on PC, and there are no physical PC games. Not really. It's all
Not so
digital.
much anymore.
It just depends on what storefront you buy from and where you buy like the key. So there's a. I guess the analog and PC would be like just key reselling, right?
Yeah,
Um,
that would it seems to be, but yeah, we were discussing that a little bit before the podcast. So the yeah, with the digital side, I used to buy physical and trade in a whole bunch as when I was younger, and I think that makes a lot more sense for younger people because you don't have as much money. So you want to just make the most of it, and so you play your games, you realize you're probably not going to play them again, or hopefully you have your own self-awareness to be able to understand, well, am I going to replay this game? Am I not going to replay this game? So you got some games, you know which ones you're going to trade in, but then the trade-in market becomes so volatile. So part of the reason I shifted away from it, there's a couple different reasons. First, as I got into PC and realized it was only could be digital, I felt, you kind of get used to it and it's like, oh, that's fine. Then also I realized that when I was trading in games, I'd be trading in dozens of games, or well, not dozens, but a handful of games every so often, or stacking them up and realizing, oh, I'm not getting much back for some of these games. Some games you only get like $5 or $6 back, and some you could get like 20, 30, close to 40. Of course, they can never go back to the full price, because the companies have to resell them to make a profit off them as well. So they usually buy them for a fair amount. But I don't think I ever traded in a game where I got more than $30 for it. Can you recall,
some
Ed?
these days, some Nintendo games at GameStop. Actually, I was looking at it. Like I said, I wanted to get a digital copy of Smash, so I was checking the trade-in value for Super Smash at GameStop. They'll give you 35,
That's a good
which
price. Yeah,
I think that's pretty darn good.
that's about the highest.
Yeah, so that's about as high as they go, and really, it's only like the really in-demand Nintendo Switch games that go for that much. And or if you trade in something like soon after it comes out, you can probably get 30 or about 30. Like I'd say, like if you just bought I guess what just came out. So like Far Cry 6, if you bought Far Cry 6, I think
Yeah,
that just came out like
Metroid
last
Dread.
week, and yeah, and you beat those in a week and you're done with it, you'll get probably 30 to 35 back. And they do have their Power Up Pro membership where you can get 10% more. So like if you do if and some people will just, you can sell them on Facebook Marketplace too, and you'll generally get a lot more, but then, well, not that much more, but then you have to deal with actual people and people who might not
Yeah.
show up to, there's trade-offs.
Right,
So
right. Going through the stores, you have to deal with if it's a hot game, they'll give you more for it. But they're trying to resell it, so they always have to undercut the price. You can never get your full money back, which kind of makes sense. It's used too, so if we're putting the value on the physical, even though there's really no degradation of quality, it's more of the matter of the principle that this may have been used and there may be something wrong with it after you've used it, or maybe you're returning it because there's something, or trading it in because there's something wrong with it. Then there's the part where you don't know what the market reaction is going to be. So, like you said, if it's a game that's in high demand and they're selling out of used copies, they want used copies as quickly as possible because they know they can move them, because they know people are going to buy the used copy because it's cheaper. So they want those new games used as soon as possible. And the only way they can have used games is people return them, or at least that's the way it should be. I've heard stories of like GameStop and cutting open some like copies just to have a few used to start with, and then they use trade-ins. I've heard a few stories like that.
I remember hearing that they did that with Xenoblade Chronicles for the Wii,
Oh
because
God,
like they I guess like new copies they can only sell them at retail price, or
right,
I guess they could, but they were gutting open new copies to sell them as used at like $80 versus like $50, because they're like, well, it's used, we can sell it at whatever we want because
right.
it's in demand. So, but I don't know how true that is. But there's probably
I'm sure it
probably
happened a few
some
times.
probably some locations have done that.
Yeah, and they could even do something weird like they have the employees buy them and return them, so it like counts as a resale. Um,
Yeah.
that's kind of trash. And at the same time, you were saying like trading credit. So when you're going through stores as well, it's possible that you could either ask for cash, which they always offer you less because they want to keep the money in the ecosystem, or you can do store credit, which usually you get full value, and then like you said, there's the trade-in. If you're part of the memberships, you get additional value, and that way you can get more money. Or
and
if you're trading it in,
a lot of times if you trade, oh, go ahead. You were going to say the same thing
yeah,
I was.
we were just going to say if you trade in towards more purchases, they'll usually give you more money as well because it keeps the money in the ecosystem. They don't really lose out that much. It's
Which, I mean,
yeah.
if you're gonna trade it in, it makes sense to take the. You know, when I traded in my PS4, I actually got an extra $50 because they needed PS4s.
Yeah.
You know, gaming's hot right now, and there aren't even enough of the last gen systems to go around. So, you know, if you were upgrading, now is a good time to trade in your old device. I mean, that's probably why our friend, got so much back for his Switch.
Yeah, that's the thing. Also, it's both a good and a bad time because you'll get tons of money, but there's not a guarantee that you'd be able to get the system that you wanted, or the next, because there's still the supply shortages on everything.
Yeah.
I've seen Switches here and there, but that's a Switch. They've had those for forever. Not those OLEDs. The OLEDs, of course, are sold out because that's the hot one. But I've seen throughout the months of the pandemic is like the random Animal Crossing or Switch bundle just sitting on the shelf, and there'd be like usually 2 or 3, depending on the store. So that one's not so much hard to come by, but the Xbox and the PlayStation 5, those ones are still in low stock. And they could discontinue PlayStation 4 Pros, so someone who was like, well, you know what, I could trade in my PS4 because it's a high value and I'll at least trade up to a PS4 Pro. It's like, you're not going to find that one. So if you want a Pro, you're going for a PS5, and that we know the story on that one. So I did some research, and I read an article in preparation for today. Hang on, I want to make sure. From GameIndustry.biz, talking about the decline of the used market and some different factors and the different arguments that get levied at it. So part of what's the intended cycle is that consumers will trade in their games, which younger consumers or people with less disposable income will be able to trade in games they've already purchased, get some money, and then they buy new games. And it seems the trend does hold up that people trade in to buy new copies. Of course, people will still try and buy used copies if it's more affordable. So on the consumer side, used game market is fantastic. And then on the corporate side is where it's, other than the reseller, it is something they want to prevent. All the publishers and a lot of developers don't want it because they want to be able to sell their old copies. Now, I did see an interesting note in industry.biz, and I believe they were quoting from someone's shareholder meeting, is that it means with the used game market, it means that retailers aren't buying legacy stock games. An interesting point I wanted to bring up, because the real key problem between the reseller market like GameStop and publishers and developers. Now, it did mention also that some indie developers say it's worthwhile because when they make a smaller game, people might not be willing to make a full investment. But if they have games to trade in and get some extra credit on top of that towards a new purchase, they will more likely to experiment and buy other games. Or at least that's how I was interpreting the quote. So that makes sense. All that makes sense, and that's basically it. People want to buy games. People just want to either get the games at the right price or don't have the money, in which they don't care about the price. And you and I go back and forth on this argument where, you have decent means, but there's certain principles you have about what you're willing to spend. And I'm a little more flexible about that, and we both handle that in different ways. You always look for sales, and you've just recently started taking advantage of Game Pass. I use Game Pass and subscription services plus GameFly, so I can rent games, and that's one of the main reasons I'm still into physical, is because there isn't reliable ways to rent every game on every platform. Try a game. Once I determine that I like it, I will return it, and then I will buy the full copy and continue playing it. Or I'll at least wait until I'm ready to play a game, and then I will buy it at whatever price it's at. Because I've seen a lot of good sales for games that are on my wish list on Steam, and I've passed up on them because I'm like, I'm not ready to play it yet. There's no reason for me to spend the money now. And then by the time I get there, if I have the money, I buy it. If I'm not ready to, if I don't have the money, I don't buy that one. And I've got plenty of games on every price range across every platform. So that's the way I manage it, and I try to buy, and I definitely buy new in order to do that. And most of the time, I buy digital. So of course, that considers new, and that's as much money as you can send to those companies. So, getting back on track, the main issue has always been that developers and publishers don't get any returns on resale. And I thought it was an interesting point that they were talking about. They want to keep selling legacy stock. So if they were getting a cut on the resale of the discs or the cartridges, whatever you want to call, other than the retro gaming, we have to tackle that separate, because that's, I think at this point, that is a whole other can of worms that the industry has put itself in. But for newer games with the resell, what do you think, Ed, about the concept of, if GameStop and Best Buy and what all the other like major chains that had that do handle reselling games and even smaller stuff, do you think it would be fair, or do you think that they should be giving a cut back to the developers? Like, don't you think those should be above board deals, or what's your take on that?
I mean, I think it's bizarre that I feel like video game publishers are like the only industry that feels like they're entitled to, you know, part of a second, a third party sale. I mean, you don't see like car manufacturers, hating the used market, and maybe they do, but like it's normalized that you can buy a used car, you can buy, you don't. People don't
Yeah.
think it's weird to like buy a house that someone already lived in. Nobody's buying a brand new house everything, but there's plenty of other markets where like the secondary market is just a normal thing. So I and like you were saying that a lot of these used trade-in values go towards buying new games. I'm probably gonna buy some digital games with some of the trade-in I have because I want them digitally, and a lot of times I buy them towards new games. So it's like, you'd think that they might see it as something that enables people to continue participating in the new market because um you know I mean, like you said, I have the means, but a lot of times, like, for me, it's not always about that I need the money. Sometimes I just want to get rid of something, and maybe if I bought digital, that wouldn't be necessary. But like, I like to curate a collection in a way, but I just think it's bizarre that publishers think that they're entitled to that. But I mean, of course, they do think that. But I mean, it's kind of along the same lines as how they view piracy. They view it as all these lost sales, where it's just part of. It just seems like it's part of the market, and I think that on PC it's not as a big of an issue of not having uh physical copies, because there are a lot of markets through which you can buy PC games at a discount. Like there's all kinds of key resellers that even like brand new games you can get $10 or $20 off. There's all the humble bundles where you can get all kinds of deals on games. There's multiple marketplaces. There's a good old games, Epic Game Store, which not a lot of people like, but there's Steam. I mean, there's all kinds of markets where you can find it. It's very competitive on PC, but PlayStation is not very competitive. In fact, like Sony removed the ability for third-party retailers to sell digital codes for games. So I can't buy like a digital code for a copy of Ratchet and Clank at Best Buy, even though you can do that with Switch games and Xbox games. So there's no way for those to be discounted. I think I just think it's at least from a consumer standpoint. I think having that market is a important part of a pro consumer healthy ecosystem. Um, so, but I mean I can see where they don't like that, but I mean I'm a consumer. I'm gonna advocate for myself.
Right, right. And I think we should advocate for the consumer, because good business should be good for the consumer. And going back to your car dealership now analogy, and I think that's actually a really good example. And that was speaking to the point I was asking is because the actual car manufacturers deal in used. Like if you go to a Ford, you can go to a Ford dealership and they sell both new and used. So Ford gets in on its own used business. And then of course there's smaller used dealers everywhere. And I'm not sure what their kind of situation is, but at the same time, the manufacturers make new models of the cars, old models get obsolete, things go out of warranty, there's parts maintenance, there's recalls, there's all that. So I wonder if the other manufacturers get get kickbacks somewhere else down the line. Need more research on that. But what I
they make money through like service. A lot of dealerships, their big part of their income is like service.
Right. So there's that. And then the resale market as well, because cars are expensive and big machines to make. And they want to, if a car can be resold, they make profit off the same thing twice. So that's the point, is the industry has been fighting used sales instead of trying to figure out how to get in on it. And I wonder if that resistance comes from inside the industry or it comes from outside as well. Like maybe GameStop wasn't willing to negotiate. Maybe companies like like resellers, like no, and I get it. They don't want less profit. No one wants less profit, but I agree with you that it should be a sign of a healthy market with the resale, and they need the competition. That's the thing. We need it to be price competitive to help have this to help have make sure that the values get checked. Because when games aren't that great or when something's discounted, there wouldn't be any reason for there to be sales on games or much if there wasn't competition for people to be able to get games at cheaper prices. Because if they held hostage, it's just like the ecosystems and whatnot, then they wouldn't have any incentive. And I think we've talked about this a little bit before, like with the monetization, like PlayStation has to do sales and deals because if you can get games cheaper on the competing platforms, you're just going to stop buying PlayStation because it's too expensive, unless you really want those games. But there's a bunch of third-party games that are available on, Xbox and Nintendo as well as Sony. And if you can get them just cheaper all the time from someplace else, you're probably just going to go, you know what? Forget PlayStation because it's just too expensive. People will do that.
So Sony has pretty good sales as far as there's a website I go to. I don't know if you ever heard of it. It's called Deku Deals, DEKU Deals.com. And they used to only track sales for like Nintendo Switch games, and they would have historical prices for like all the major physical retailers like GameStop, Best Buy, Amazon, Walmart, Target, and also the digital. But they recently started tracking Xbox and PlayStation, which is pretty cool. But like you can see some of the multi-platform games, like PlayStation has had the lowest price for certain digital games. So
I'm not even talking the quality of the sales. I'm just saying having sales in general.
Oh yeah. But I'd say they're competitive
right.
Yeah.
So even digital, like there has to be a competition there for the pricing because you need to be the platform that people feel it's affordable to get on there and plus value. But going back to use, like I think that factors into being another avenue of competition that encourages good sales and even in the digital space because physical and digital inherently compete. Because people want whatever the best price is. And a lot of times physical goes down in price faster or there's a lot more sales on physical because the stores need to move the product. And also with used, like that's the thing where there's the inherent value of you didn't get this copy fresh, so you don't know if there's something wrong with it and someone's already had it. It could be scratched, it could be damaged, who knows. So there's all that. The other side of this is that games are just digital code. It's not expensive for them to create new copies of the game. The only expense comes from the fact that they have to create for physical is that they create the boxes, create the box art, and press the discs, and then they have to ship them out to stores. Whereas by comparison, for digital, they certify the files. Maybe it goes through a certification process, which would happen for physical anyways. And then it gets hosted on a server somewhere. I'm sure they pay a price maybe to Sony for it being hosted on their services. Maybe Sony just foots the bill on that, and they take a cut from the sale, and that just factors into the cut they take from the sales and whatnot. It's much cheaper in general to do digital distribution than it is to do physical distribution. So that's where some of this gets really funky, is that physical should be inherently way more expensive than it is, but it's not. And digital should also, on the other hand, digital should be way cheaper. People have always said, why aren't we getting the $10 discount on these for buying it physical, or for buying it digital rather than physical, and saving them the money? And we know why. It's greed. Like, they don't care. They're like, yeah, it's the same thing. We can't be doing that. So in a way, you're getting a better deal physically, because the physical aspect, like, you can trade it in. You're getting this copy that could possibly be used offline, but that's becoming less and less relevant. You paid for the box, the box and stuff is all extra, and sometimes you get the extra special edition features and things like that from inside, or the collector's editions, like physical stuff, and we were talking about that too. We were envisioning like a future where perhaps what's going to happen is the digital version is going to be the default, and you'll get when you come pick up your special edition, you'll have the code. But then there's like the actual collector's editions these days will be the only way you can get a physical copy, and they'll just switch to by order. I think we're still not close enough to that. I think people are still getting used to it, but at the same time, there's a place for the physical market there. So, yeah, we're going all over the place.
I just want to say there are like intangible benefits of digital. There is convenience. I know you and a lot of people like to buy Switch games digital because it's a portable system. You don't want to be lugging around a bunch of carts, and
You could
I'm
lose
kind of
it.
going that direction. But losing it, they're easy to lose. I don't think I've ever lost a cartridge game, even as a kid. I'm sure if you have kids, it's nice not to be
Yeah.
not to have to worry about that. um and you do have the convenience where you don't have to leave your house to do it, but then
Yep.
you also,
Midnight downloads,
yeah. So
preloads.
there's reasons why a digital copy could actually be more valuable to a given person, and you don't have to store it either. So like, I have limited space, and that's,
Physical
I mean,
storage, not
everyone has, yeah, physical storage. Everyone has limited space in their homes. Some people have shelves and shelves of games, but
mhm.
not everyone has that space. And eventually, if you've been gaming for decades, you either buy a bigger house or you go digital, I guess, or get rid of some of your games. So it's like,
Yeah.
um, so there's reasons. But like what we were saying about physical games being more of a specialty product. I mean, it's already kind of the case with some indie games. Like, a lot of indie releases will get a digital release at first, and down the line you'll be able to get it physical. Like, one of the real popular companies is Limited Run Games,
Right.
and they'll usually have like a pre-order period where anyone who wants it can put in an order, and after that they know how many to produce, and they'll fulfill them later on. I hear that's been really bad though now with the pandemic, and especially because sometimes they wait for like the last update on a game. So the developer might have another update, and, well, we don't want to produce the carts yet without the latest update. So it's like you're waiting a long time. So it's like, do you want to play this game now or in a year when it comes out? Um, and even some like more major indie games are like that. Like Kena Bridge of Spirits came out about a month ago. I know you bought that digital. I haven't bought it yet, but I kind of want the physical edition, which is $10 more. And to me, that might be worth it. It just seems like, sometimes if there's a game that I feel is special or interesting in the way, I like to have a physical copy of it. But so it is almost like a vinyl collector's market, like you have in the you know in the music industry. And there's still a demand for vinyl, but you wonder, I guess things could be physical, but to have a physical market also requires hardware support. Um, so it's like, if they don't build a console with a disk drive or a cartridge slot, then that market can't exist. It's not like you can just go out and, I don't know. I mean, you can go out and buy like a turntable to play your vinyl. Maybe in the future to engage in the physical market, you're going to have to go out and buy an external drive or something. Um, so it it may just continue to get more and more of a boutique item to have a physical copy of a game, and in some ways it's almost just symbolic because a lot of games require day one updates. Although I will say I was really impressed that Metroid Dread, when I put it in, no update. It didn't update the first. They do have an update now because there was a glitch. But like when I started playing it, it didn't have any updates. So I thought that was pretty cool. I mean, it's rare that you put in a game and there's like no day one update.
Yeah, that's kind of a Nintendo philosophy, though. That They do a lot of quality testing and try to release the game in a very stable state, and then just kind of patch it after. So other companies, that's a scheduling, that's a production issue that's solvable. It's tricky. Games are getting bigger and whatnot, but that is a thing. What I was trying to get back to was if the companies actually embrace the used market and actually organized so that way they actually got a cutback on it. Not like I said, I don't know if these conversations have been had and who's the stubborn party. I'm assuming it's both, that both just want so much of a cut or be like, you can't do this or whatnot. Because think of it this way: if GameStop was able to be sanctioned, or we'll use GameStop as the most obvious example, was able to be sanctioned and be like, okay, every time a copy of Madden comes in, you can resell it for this or that, and we get, or this percentage of a cut. Whenever you resell it, you get this percentage of a cut. But there's so many terms that might go, it's like, because GameStop will fluctuate the price. Does GameStop get the final say? Does EA get the final say on, like, Madden and FIFA, Call of Duty? Well, that's Activision, but I'm mixing matching, but they're all the same at this point. They might as well just all be one company because they release the same like 4 games and it all blends together. My cynical opinion.
It's like you wonder though, like what would GameStop's incentive be to give them that cut? I mean, so they would have to gain something from that arrangement. The only thing I can think of is kind of what happened a little while ago, where it was announced that Xbox or Microsoft and Xbox, they made a deal with GameStop to where Xbox is sold at GameStop would get probably a very small cut of digital sales, but that would give them an incentive to want to sell more Xboxes. So maybe there's like a give and take there. If you know if the console maker wants a cut of the used market, maybe they have to give up a cut of the digital market.
Well, that's the thing. I think the margins, then it's all in the margins. Maybe GameStop would get a better deal on each copy sold because they then say like, well, this copy could potentially be resold this many times. And while they wouldn't make as much if they were purely in control of it, then EA wouldn't be fighting or wouldn't be trying to do like they did Project $10 way back when in the 360 era. And said like, hey, you can only get this pass and do this online stuff and do these features if you buy it brand new. At the same time, they could also do like recycling programs where if it was all above board, then they could send back discs or whatnot to EA, maybe get some refunds or whatnot. Not that anyone wants to give back money, but that would be something there where it's like they can repackage these as like new games instead, or trying to think of how the economy would work out like that. But it's the matter of once the copy's there, if both party, then you don't have them fighting against each other. Instead, they're working with each other and making deals. So both companies are doing that. And it benefits EA to not have to press extra discs, or publishers in general. I'm using EA as a specific example in this. But them not having to press or create all these extra physical copies means that they're using less resources. It costs less. They're making more money off of each copy of game. They're not fighting GameStop and trying to prevent these things and coming up with wasting time with these extra tactics. Instead, they could embrace it, make deals with that, and then that way developers are still getting money. GameStop still makes money because then they're not trying to do all these weird they don't have to make so many weird policies in order to make money off it, and they can just keep reselling copies or whatnot. Maybe the games would retain value longer, but it depends, because also some of this is self-inflicted. Like, the games come out yearly, they don't get updated. But that was another point in the article. So I wanted to bring up this point and get your thought. Is the Game Biz article was bringing up how people are playing games longer, and the games as service and free to play models are cutting in. So people don't even have games to trade in, or just aren't buying nearly as many games because they're playing the same games longer and they just don't want to trade in. So that's where some of this is changing in the market. So what's your gut reaction on that, Ed, when it comes to games as services, and how do you think that should factor into the used market?
Well, for a game that's a service, I mean, physical copy doesn't really mean much because so much of the content and the is going to come digitally. Even if you have a physical copy, it's just like a license key. Like what's an example of a game that was actually like Destiny? Destiny is not free to play, or at least it wasn't, right? I don't know if it is now,
Destiny
but
2 is now free to play.
but it
Destiny
wasn't
1
when
was
it came
not.
out. Wasn't, yeah.
And
But
yes, Destiny 2 wasn't originally free to play either.
you had to buy a copy of it. So
Right.
like if you had a copy of it before it was free to play and you sold it, I mean, the next person might put in that disc to play it, but what the game they're playing is not going to be what's on the disc. So it's like how much does a disc actually mean in that case?
Yeah, I guess that's a good
You know,
point. So, what do you think in this day and age? What is the point of the physical copy of a video game?
um well, like, what are the advantages of physical copy?
No, what is the point of the physical? It's digital data that can easily be transferred over the internet. So, what's the point if that's way cheaper, way more efficient for everyone? What's the point of the physical copy? I kind of have my own,
I
take on that
think
right now, but
I think there's a couple
what
points
comes to mind?
at least for the a point for in favor for the manufacturer is that they just get to maintain a retail relationship with all these retailers. So like
Why does that matter?
you know I I think I think part of the reason that these companies want to stock their consoles is because they get follow-up business. Someone might come in for a game, they're spending more money at the retailer. If they come in for a game, they might buy something else. Like, having, if it were just a one-time purchase for a console, which probably doesn't have much margin either, like, it's they that retail relationship is important for them to continue to sell the console, because I don't not everyone's going to want to buy a PS5 just from Sony, but maybe they will eventually. But right now, I think those having those relationships with the retailers are important for these console makers to sell their consoles and their video games.
So yeah, what I was trying to see if you would say it is to reach the consumers that don't have the same, that have different needs for accessibility, because there are people who don't have as good internet, have data caps, and it would cost them a lot to get those games downloaded, or it's just not feasible. That's why physical copies have that's the inherent advantage, is all the data is there. It doesn't impede anything else. You put it in the system, it puts the data in, and it's good. And that's pretty much what it is. We're past the point now where the physical copy is where the games are run off the physical copy. Everything's pretty much installed to a hard drive. The disk is just a storage medium and a license key altogether. Now that could take many different forms too. Like with the physical, I think we're due for a change in physical format. We've had cartridges, we've had discs. Discs are still the cheapest, but we know for a fact that like Blu-ray discs, despite having super high capacities, they're like in the Blu-ray readers, they're very slow. They're not as fast as compared to either a thumbstick or an SD card, or which is a cartridge in general. Instead, what happens is it reads the data and installs it to the disk, and every once in a while it spins back up, reads some more data, or it authenticates off the key because it shows that, okay, the disk is in the system, so that proves that you have a copy to play. But you're inherently playing the games off the hard drives now. So that's the point of what physical copies have been, is A, reaching people in retailer who don't shop digitally, and also providing the game in a way that doesn't require internet connection, which is less of an issue these days, but there's still areas with very poor internet connection, data caps, etc., very poor internet service in general. So that's kind of the inherent thing with that. When your point about the consoles, I take a little contention with, and not you specifically, the concept is they would have to sell those anyways because they're a business, so they're going to sell products. So even if the games weren't carried there, you'd still try to make profit off the hardware because they'd want people to come back. And like, there's the accessories, there's swag. Like that's what GameStop and ThinkGeek have evolved into. You know, they just move all the physical tchotchkes and stuff like that.
Amiibo.
The merch, and well, Amiibo is it's the Toys to Life trend. That's a tying things in, which is cool. I think inherently Toys to Life is neat. It just doesn't get used in like the most consumer friendly way all the time, which is annoying. But yeah, that's the inherent purpose of physical, is to bypass the limitations of possibly not being in a good area with internet and not being where the consumers are. Consumers will go to stores. Consumers will go to Walmart. Consumers will go to Target. They'll go to Best Buy, and they won't shop online. They won't go into the eShops of the PlayStation stores and whatnot because they don't know, they don't care. And then there's also the personal aspects, like they like the collection, they like having the thing on the shelf, and so on. So that's what I was seeing if we can get to with the point of that. Otherwise, digital makes total sense, except when it comes to the amount of control the consumer has over their product. And that's what you were saying, like with the advantages and what we're talking about here with used games.
Yeah, I mean, we still don't know. Can you download Wii games now? Like, I know you can't buy them, but can you still download your like Wii? You still download like your from the Wii eShop or whatever. Let me see. I'm Google.
Then
I'm
the
Googling.
Wii didn't sell digital copies of like bigger Wii games, I don't think.
No, I'm just saying. I'm sorry. I'm not being clear. What I mean is like, is there any marketplace where you can't download what you bought still? And I'm looking at a Nintendo support article, and they still have a how to re-download Wii Shop channel content. And it says,
yeah.
It says the Wii Shop is closed for new purchases. Previously purchased titles can still be re-downloaded. However, this option will also be discontinued at some point in the future. It hasn't yet. I mean, they say they're going to, but Sony tried to, and there was a huge backlash, and you can still down. You know, it's I understand them closing for new purchases. You know, both Sony and Nintendo are removing the ability to use credit cards on their old consoles. Like you can't use a credit card, and you won't be able to on the 3DS, Wii U, PS3, or Vita. And from what I've read, some of that is just like financial regulations. It's, you know, they don't want to have to update the software and worry about vulnerabilities when, you know, you can still add that value, add that credit from like, you know, your Switch or your PS4 or PS5. Yeah. So like I can understand that, but you know, I guess what I'm getting at is like digital, they say at some point you won't be able to re-download it, and you know, maybe that's reasonable. Maybe part of that is on the consumer to back up their stuff, but
not always allowed to though.
Yeah, that's true
to some extent. So what we're getting into then is a side conversation, which could be even in a whole episode in and of itself, but I think it ties in most strongly to this, is the video game industry currently is terrible when it comes to archival preservation. The legacy of video gaming outside of the enthusiast base is terrible. We constantly have platforms that are not backwards compatible. There's license deals that make games unresellable or even get delisted. It's just so sad because we lose so much history from the video game market. Now, granted, we do get also some remasters and remakes, but then there's also the value proposition of, are you doing enough? Like Castlevania just recently rebundled the three of their Game Boy Advance games, I think it was. Or We'll just be clear with Nintendo. Nintendo Switch Online is trash. We had the Wii, the Virtual Console was perfect, and they had that Virtual Console. I think they carried over it largely to Wii U, but then with Switch, they're just like, nah, rebuy everything.
Hold on. The consumer policies are not good. The fact that you have to rebuy or resubscribe, but I think the actual app is pretty good. I like that it has the rewind feature, and I like that it has online multiplayer. So I think like some of the features they add are nice. Like I've played NES and SNES games with our friend Mike, and I've played those online and had a good time. So like technologically, I like what they offer, but in terms of the pricing model and the fact that they don't carry over previous purchases, yes, I agree. That part is trash.
Yes, backwards compatibility has been such a weird thing for the consoles, and now we know for a fact, because Xbox is also setting an extremely good example, and we know from the PC market as well. Emulators are a thing. We've caught from like the Nintendo, the classic Nintendo and the Super Nintendo Classic and the PlayStation Classic. These companies know how to just take emulators from online, modify them using their own, then look at the source code and re-render those games, or even use emulators as part of how they run the software of games they're re-releasing. All this exists. There's no reason they can't be officially emulating these games and offering them still available for people and keep a consistent account system that says you have this title, you have this, you have that. Your point about the upgrades that they've made to some of those old games as part of Nintendo Switch Online, I think that's completely separate. I think if you buy the game, I'm trying to think of like a specific what's one of the games you've played recently on Nintendo Switch Online that had the upgrade?
It's been a while. I think the most recent one I played was Super Metroid.
That's fine. Super Metroid.
That was last year.
It has save states and rewind, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So that one doesn't have online multiplayer, but we know like games are gonna have online multiplayer, or have had like the online remote multiplayer added. So here's the thing: there's no reason you should be charged again for having the copy of Super Metroid. But if you want that enhanced version of Super Metroid, like, hey, we're offering this patch. It's an enhanced version. If you already own it, it's $5. If you don't own it, then you can buy the enhanced version for 10, which comes with a copy of the game and that. They should do that. And then if they want to say, like, if you have a legacy version, you don't need to get it patched, but the updated version, and that's why you pay the $5, and then they only sell the updated version because it includes all the features. Now, I know, like, if Mike was here, he'd say, like, it'd be nice to have the choice and only pay $5 if I know I'm never going to use those features. And then for the games that have that get the enhanced multiplayer, the online multiplayer features, I think that makes sense for, like, you only get access to those if you have Nintendo Switch Online. Now, of course, subscribing to have online multiplayer is stupid. It should be intolerable. It should be illegal. Is something that should be fixed. But I understand, at least what the policy is now, like, you can't use that feature unless you're online. So I understand bundling it in to add value to the online service. So I think those can be independent and mutually coexist. And it's just, even now, like, there's hardware specific issues where, like, PlayStation 3 is incredibly difficult to emulate because its chip architecture was so strange and so unique. But Sony
Did you see recently they announced that the emulator boots every game?
Yeah, so that's great.
So they've made a lot of progress on that emulator for, like, a fan project.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is a complicated architecture.
Yeah, and computers are getting better, so it's getting easier to emulate weaker and weaker machines, and it just they figure stuff out. Now, if these companies had the source code and were able to just, like, run it, and obviously what Sony does is they have their server farm for PlayStation Now that runs off of PS3 hardware. They stream the games there, or maybe, who knows? Maybe it's modified PC hardware as well, so they don't have to. So that way they can take advantage.
I think it's literally a server rack with a bunch of, like, cell processors in it.
That's funny. Yeah, I think they could easily emulate PlayStation 1 and PlayStation 2 games and just have those up. All the first party ones, no problem, shouldn't be an issue. Obviously, from third party on, that should be something that needs to be done. And this is also part of the issue is that the companies are constantly, or they're inconsistent. Actually, that's the problem. They're inconsistently re-releasing and supporting their older titles because eventually they're just like, well, this is a dead property, or we're not going to make any money off this. It costs us more money. That's not the point. If you have the game and already have the code, you could put it up, you leave it there, and you let people just buy it whenever. And some people may discover it. Streaming now has opened up a whole new audience where it's like streamers are trying to find content. So they find weird games, like, nobody's ever played this. I'm gonna play this because it's gonna be something different. Turns on, suddenly hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of new people buy these games because their favorite streamer played it. Something like that can happen, and that's where the archivalness needs to come back, and where it's great that we have the retro enthusiast market, and because there's only these games there, and the only reason that exists is because the companies refuse to take responsibility of like keeping their games available, especially when we know at this point, like, you can have nearly the entire original Nintendo console library under a gig. like all those games, I don't even know if it's half a gig at this point, but the sizes of those games are so small by comparison to today's standards.
I think it's not necessarily true that the retro market only exists because there's no official support for those games on modern consoles. I mean, they're collectibles. I think even if you could like
I meant
buy
why it's
all
really
these old games,
important. Not that
well,
it's necessary.
It's not even that important. Like you said, you can have all the
Or
games
only
in under
developed.
a gig on your PC. Like, it's not hard to find pretty much anything like pre PS4 and Switch is like very easy to find. The company Nintendo and Sony are not, and Microsoft are not that worried about games that are that old. So it's not hard to find those copies easily on the internet. The emulators are easy to set up.
But it's not official, and that's the thing. They fight all these piracy. They waste so much time fighting piracy and whatnot because they just won't do the easier thing, which is if they just make the game available on their current hardware or through official means. They could even do their own emulator and launcher on PC for their old games, and that's also available on their consoles, and be like, here you go. You can come here, punch in your credit card, and you can buy our old library, and it's just here. And I don't know if I think a lot of it is just lack of foresight. I don't think enough of it is when it comes to first party, because obviously with third party, that's different. But third parties also could be doing these things and they're not. I don't know if it's deliberately like, hey, we might just remake this eventually, but why not just make your copy available? Because then I think I can see it. And I know I'm sounding like a conspiracy theorist right now, but I guarantee someone in a boardroom at a shareholder meeting said this. It's like, well, we want there eventually to be a scarcity because then when we do put it out again, then people will just buy the same edition that we just ran on an emulator because there's no way to get that original copy anymore. So this is the only way to get the copy of that. And I think we've seen that with Square Enix with the remastering all its Final Fantasies. They could easily just be running these things off of the emulators and put up the old editions as they are, but they keep like touching them up and redoing them, and not in ways that make sense. People would love to have just the classic Super Nintendo version of Final Fantasy IV. Now there's the Super Nintendo version. I think there's also a PlayStation 1 version, and I think that one's also pretty good. I'm not sure. Then there's a GBA version, which I'm not sure what all the changes between these. But then they also did a full remake of it on DS. And that's kind of considered the definitive edition, I think, because it's very faithfully remade, other than it's
Fantasy IV?
Final Fantasy IV.
Yeah.
Formerly Final Fantasy II of Super Nintendo, for those who are keeping track. But Final Fantasy IV, and then they definitively remade that on DS in 3D graphics, added some voice acting, redid cutscenes, did some new stuff, etc., cleaned up some stuff. And I think that's considered the definitive version because of that. But there are people who would love if Square just put all of those versions on one. This is the Final Fantasy IV collection. plus Final Fantasy IV did get a sequel series. That was also, I think, like on Super Nintendo. No, mobile phones. Mobile phones with sprite graphics. I don't think they ever remade that, though. I'm not sure. I think, well, I don't think they did a full remake of it. I think they did like the remasters that they put on like PC and whatnot, but that's about it. So, but Square wants to try and be like, well, if we just don't ever make this like super, then people just keep having to rebuy it every single generation instead of us maintaining and letting people keep doing that. So in a way, it's a trick for them to be able to keep taking advantage of the consumer market for that. And I think a lot of the other companies see it that way, is let the franchise die, and then if we ever choose to come back, then people will just will be happy with just the bare minimum amount of effort, because it's the only current way to, it's the easiest current way to get it.
Yeah, I wish they would do that, but like it's, you say they're always fighting piracy, but they're not really fighting piracy of like old systems. Like a lot of the high profile cases where Nintendo has sued a ROM site owner it's because they're like promoting Switch games. So it's like, I was browsing right now. I can go to like the ROMs subreddit and they have a link to like a GitHub page, which is like, here, go to Nintendo. You want Wii games? Here they are. They're all in like the Internet Archive. Like every single dump from every single disc is there. Like it's so easy to find them. Like Nintendo is not trying that hard to stamp out their I think they try to scare people. They try to maintain the position that like emulation is illegal, which in the US it's not. Sony lost that case way back in like the 90s. I think they were suing, didn't they sue a company called like Bleem Station or something that was doing something like that? That's a settled issue. So it's like, but they do try to discourage it, which is a shame.
Right. Well, and that's the thing. Well, so the thing is, you say they're not trying so hard.
They're not trying that hard to like, it's incredibly easy to find non-current gen games online.
Well, that's not, I would
download.
No, that's not the thing. It's not that they're not trying too hard anymore. It's that it's such a fruitless fight. The music industry already went through this with music piracy and realized, look, copying data online is just so easy that if you cut off one source, they're like already it's backed up to, because everyone knows. So they only go after like the big sites where it's the easiest or it's the most prolific, because they realize that, all right, this right now is the thing. So they're just kind of, they're playing a little bit of whack-a-mole, but they're only taking out the biggest one because it's because it makes it harder again for people to pirate again. But at this point, they can't be lawyering up against everything, because they literally have to sue the entire internet, because anyone who has a server rack or even a hard drive connected to the internet could back up a bunch of those games and recirculate them. There's no way.
Yeah, I mean, I just searched like play retro games online, and there's like tons of websites you can just like stream all these old games in your browser. Like they can't.
And then there's browser streaming now, and then game streaming. Yeah, that stuff's getting easier and easier. And I was also gonna say, I just had to laugh because the latest news article about Nintendo cracking down on some streaming company, like they forced them in the court order to destroy all their equipment. And I'm just like, oh, I'm sure that company, I imagine in the background, like, oh, you want us to destroy equipment? No problem. Backs up data onto new equipment, drills holes in front. See, we destroyed the old equipment. Then this is new equipment, so that doesn't count in the court order. Like
I just imagine like the Doug Bowser being like that scene in Office Space where they're smashing the printer. He's got his baseball bat and he's beating up all the servers of this company.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fruitless.
Or even like we want to talk about, they want to migrate to the service system, and Nintendo wants to have everyone paying into Nintendo Switch Online. Why? There's really no excuse for them to not have ported the entire Virtual Console, other than first party titles, because we'll say that maybe they had to renegotiate deals for third parties, or third parties said like, no, we might have outright declined because they had their own plans. Could have happened. But Nintendo has complete control over its first parties, minus those outliers like Super Mario RPG, where they like tied in with other companies. So,
but why don't we have Earthbound? I mean,
that's what I mean.
Where's Earthbound?
Yeah, exactly. That's all the first party titles should have been like from the Wii Virtual Console should have been over, plus all the cheap like third party ones they could have gotten. And then they said, hey, everything's here, and then we're doing the upgrades. But that's not what they're doing. Instead, they're like recurating and only putting out like a handful at a time. Makes no sense. Oh, well, it's I shouldn't say it makes no sense. I say it makes no sense because there's just I don't think there's a there is no good consumer friendly reason for it. It's all about the business. And some of it I also think is very short-sighted business. We're like, you know what? We don't really want to like put out all these titles or make these available again. I don't know. I honestly
I
Nintendo's a weird one, but all like the Japanese business mindset is very weird. It's very different. It's different in key ways from like Western thinking, but all of it's very stupid business. Like
Well, they I think
philosophy.
they also want to like reserve the right to remake these titles too. Like they're coming out with the Advance Wars 1 and 2 remake, and we don't have GBA games on Nintendo Switch Online, and probably if they add it, they're not going to add Advance Wars 1 and 2 because they want you to buy the new ones.
Right, but there's
Um
also no reason those games are probably going to be fundamentally different in some ways. So there's no reason that they couldn't be available in both forms. Or
I agree.
bundle in the original version with the old one. It's not going to take up that much space and let people be able to compare them. And then they see like, oh, this is that much better. Like there's reasons and things like that that they couldn't they
And
can be making
you
value
know that
propositions.
they haven't announced Super Smash Brothers for the N64 coming to Nintendo Switch Online because
No, they
they want you to play Ultimate.
right. And in that I have a bit of a different feeling about, but I think in general you should let people have the older version. There's such different games that if you're only interested in playing that old one, you are never going to buy the new thing anyways because you didn't care. So it doesn't matter. It's like trying to hold people hostage by lack of choice is just such a stupid philosophy. And it just shows you have zero confidence in your actual products because you're like, well, our thing isn't good enough to sell on its own, so we need to hold people hostage or we need to hold things hostage in order to get people to be like, well, I have no other choice than to buy this. It's like, no, man, that's so stupid. Don't do that. Um, and also, Melee, like people clamor for them to do like a remaster of Melee or things like that. And I don't think it's necessary in personally, but on the principle of archival and just letting people have the choice, yeah, they should totally do it. They should totally bring over Melee. They should make them available on online download through their systems and let people be able to buy them and play them. Even if they're not like patched and updated for like online play and things like that. Just let them play. I sell it, keep selling, let your old games sell because it's just profit. There's going to be people who literally just buy them for collecting purposes, just to have it, and maybe every novelty. You've got streamers who will buy them immediately because they're like, well, that's the new content for this week or month. The market has changed and expanded so much. Not to mention it for like other countries, it could be so much easier. Imagine like they did the Nintendo Classic and they did the Super Nintendo Classic, which they might think is like competing hardware, but at the same time, if you're only allowing a certain selection of games, it's just a category of product. They should just make those available. They should have just created like a giant Super Nintendo Classic that's just an emulator box, and they're like, we're gonna sell update cartridges, and you can buy the cartridges, and it'll add games to the hard drive. There you go, and you can just play it off the licensed Nintendo product. Once again, going back to why don't they just do it? And most of it's excuses. It has nothing to do with like real business sense. It's short term, biggest bang for the buck. I don't think a lot of these guys really think about the long term, at least not in a healthy sense. And we've seen it. That's like where the AAA industry's gone. So the retro gaming scene has been good with that. Yeah, used games need to be around. But yeah, let's shift over to the digital side there. So, how would you envision used digital sales? Ed, what would you want? Because like for PlayStation, for Xbox, it has to be on the system. You couldn't really do trading online, at least I don't think, without they want to keep it in house, so that way the value is there. But what would you how would you want that handled?
Hmm. I have a hard time seeing how you could have used digital sales and have it make sense. I mean, used games are inherently different from new games in a physical form because I mean, they do wear out. Boxes get wear. Some, you could lose the manual or the box and only have the cartridge or disc.
Discs have
Discs
laser
can get
rot.
scratched.
Yeah,
A disc
scratch,
can
laser
get
rot.
scratched. Cartridges could get, you know, the label could get peeled off. I mean, you look at listings for old retro games on eBay. They all have very, some labels have like a cut in them. Some of them are slightly torn. Like there's like used games, used vehicles. They are worse for wear than a completely new copy. Um, but so I don't know. I don't know. I'm not sure. I agree that you could have a used digital game because there really is no difference between, like, I guess from a consumer standpoint, yeah, it would be nice to resell your library, but
What do you think that maybe
why
since it's
why why would you ever buy a new digital game when you could buy a cheaper used for a quote unquote used digital game? What would be the incentive to ever buy new in that case?
FOMO, pretty much, because the game would only be available. I think it would have to do with like transferring it to a friend or something like that. Um, I think people would ultimately game the system, but what would be if you trade in
Because
a
I mean, like, if we were both on PC and we were both wanting to play the same games, like, you're playing Tales of Arise. Say like you're done with that digital, like, hey, I'll buy that from you for like $1, and then I'll sell it back to you for $1, and then we'll both have played the same game without, or something stupid like, and that wouldn't. But like you said, friends could just game the system if they're all going to play the same games, but interested at them at different times.
right, but if it was through the official systems, like the companies would get cuts for that, so they could take cuts off that transaction and
Would
therefore
they
do that.
would they set the used prices though?
That's what I was starting to wonder is trying to brainstorm this out loud. Do you think that if there was like a used price, do you think it'd have to be like because what you're doing is to effectively make this work the way it works. When you trade the license away, it means it's no longer associated with your account. You cannot re-download it. You'd have to make a new purchase in order to do it, or purchase someone else's existing license. Um, so it would
But
be
there
like a
are there are there are a limited number of licenses out there that you could resell. So only copies that were bought new would introduce a new license into the market. Otherwise, if it's all used copies, it's the same limited number of licenses, right? Like,
right, and so that leads to another question: is there's really not much cost to creating additional copies of a game because all they're doing is copying those source files to someone else's hard drive. I don't believe they have like multiple instances of a game on a server. Like for example, we'll just say Super Mario Odyssey. Like if Super Mario Odyssey is downloaded on a Switch, it's just copying the files from the source files from the main server to someone's Switch on the SD card or the hard drive. So they're not really. So the license key is literally just a string of code. They can create as many license keys as they wanted. They don't have. There's no cost. There's no significant cost to them creating more digital copies. It's just the server upkeep fees to have them there. So I guess the trying to think like how it would work for this is what's the point of that other than for users to be able to recoup some money for themselves, which maybe that in and of itself is supposed to be the point of the resell. Is the point of a resell system existing digitally is in order to let people find more ways to buy more games. Because you can't control the sales, but if someone can sell their game at any point in time, they can recoup money anytime and they're more likely to make impulse purchases and trades. And then they may repurchase games down the line. Because think about it. This is what I'm thinking. Someone buys a game new for 60. Let's just say flat. Their first purchase, they buy it 60, money out of pocket. They buy the game. They're like, okay, well, I'm done with this game. I'm going to trade my digital license in or sell it to a friend. Let's say they sell it to someone for whatever the price is. And that's where I think, and I want to come back to that element. So whatever the price is, sell that, they get some credit back to themselves, and they can use that towards the purchase of another game. Then like, oh man, you know what? I miss game A a lot. What's its current price? oh, it's on sale for like $20. You know what? I'll buy that again. The person just literally spent now more money on that. The same way as they try to get players to spend more when it comes to the games with DLC purchases and microtransactions and things like that. It's a recurring purchase. Or they might try and get it back from their friends. But if they get it from someone else, they get like a used license, a secondhand license. But if it's officially sanctioned, then the company's always getting a transaction
a cut of that transaction,
right, which is money they never got before. And then maybe if they did that and watched people like trade around and were taking cuts from all those transactions, maybe they wouldn't need to do as much with microtransactions or otherwise, or they wouldn't feel as much of a need. Now, that's me being pie in the sky because they're clearly just going to do both because they want all the money. So that would be the ideal scenario, is why they would do it, because it's a way for people to get money from things they already have, give it up, which encourages them to re-enter the ecosystem and spend more money in the ecosystem, and also hopefully be experimenting as well and giving more games a chance. What?
And if they do have microtransactions, then someone being able to get easier access to a copy to play means they might be another customer for that revenue stream.
So
I don't know if companies would ever do it unless you force them to.
Right, and I think we need laws for that. I think there needs to be laws that say, and I think we're getting there, like the software needs to be treated like it doesn't matter that it's digital. You're selling a product. The product is that bundle of code. It doesn't matter about anything else. Like, stop trying to. I think the laws just need to do that. But right now, obviously, big digital is going to pay off the governments to do all that stuff.
Yeah,
and yes, I'm sounding a little conspiracy theorist.
Digital content in general should be transferable.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, what are you? You're not going to be able to like pass your Steam account down to your kids. But you should be able to.
You kind of can.
I guess, you can.
If you give them the email and password, it's the same difference.
That's true. Yeah, but then it's not all, you can't give games like, digital content is weird. I mean, it's so new, all this idea of buying a movie or a game. Like, it feels like it's been around forever, but really it's only been like 10 years since like this started to become normalized. Like, even a few years, at least on consoles, like even a few years into the life. Honestly, not just on consoles. I remember, I think I think we were talking about this the other day, but I think I got like the orange box for my laptop in like college. That was like in 2009. And that was like when you could still, I think I bought a physical copy of that for like with the Half-Life 2 and Portal, and you had to install Steam. Like, 10, 15 years ago, Steam was still like in its infancy. And but I mean, you were buying, it's new. I guess the point is like, it's pretty new, the idea of buying software or media.
Right.
Last 10, 20 years.
Yeah. It is new, and we're still figuring out, and companies are taking advantage of it, and we're figuring out, and the public is figuring out where it's happy and where it's not, and this is why we're going through a bunch of growing pains with the industry. Oh, so I was thinking about it. So imagine this, Ed, and what you think. So we gotta let's do some armchair engineering here about how to make this used digital system work. So what if you couldn't resell the digital game? Like, there's not like a used copy on like, well, I'll say Steam. I'll just use Steam for an example. If Steam started selling quote unquote used digital games, the license that was recycled, what if there's no used general market? Like, Steam doesn't put used games on the quote unquote digital shelf. Instead, the only way you get a used license is you have to get it from another user. So that's the thing, is you buy, it always has to be a new copy. So that person always bought a copy new, and then they can trade it to someone else. And either you can do game for game, which I think would also be really cool if you took the price out of it, but just game. But that doesn't, and maybe there has to be a transaction fee for that, which, once again, if you want to do that kind of service, I think it's completely fine. If they're like, hey, you want to transfer license, or you want to give someone access or something for a cheaper price, cool, and they get a cut of that transaction. I think that's still worth doing for a consumer standpoint. But let's say you could only acquire a used license from another user. So there's that stipulation. There's no general, like Best Buy, puts it on the shop. So Steam would be like, you can only do used games from account to account. It disassociates the license here, moves it over here. A transaction occurs. We take a cut. This person gets the credit into their account, and they can use it for giving up their license to another user, so on and so forth. What do you think of that stipulation?
That might be more fair because I think it would be weird for Steam to be like promoting used licenses next to like new licenses. I
Mhm.
mean, it's already kind of weird at like GameStop where it's like, hey, you can buy a new copy for $60, but a used copy for $55. So
Yeah.
imagine like Steam is saying, well, you can buy a new copy for 55 or a reuse license or 60, a reuse license for 55. Why would you ever buy a brand new license if you could get the quote unquote used license for cheaper? Like, there'd be no reason to.
Yeah.
But unless it were just simply unavailable, which it probably would be early on, but
Yeah.
late in the lifetime of the game, they're gonna lose. Yeah, so
Free to
I
play.
could see that being fair.
Free to play games are of course exempt because there's no upfront cost to that, and if you do the microtransactions, that's associated to your account. That stuff's supposed to be locked to an account. I don't know, and they always try to ban like data account locking because there's people who spam and hack, and then they try and resell accounts and stuff like that. So I'm a lot of the stuff that they do with that is really weird, and I think it's also stupid how anti-consumer they try to be with like not letting people move stuff around. Plus, microtransactions are just awful overall.
Well, that's another like free to play games. You could have a similar market. Like, why can't I trade like a Fortnite skin with someone else? Like, you have one I want, I have one you want. Why can't we just trade?
Oh, and that's totally feasible because like Dota does that. Does exactly that.
Yeah,
They have an entire marketplace
all
economy.
games with cosmetics should do that. Like,
Yeah. But also Dota does create some artificial scarcity with some of them, like having very exclusive skins for only select players.
uh,
So that does exist too. Not everything is everything, and so there is actually a fluctuation in value. But that's a great segue back to the next thing I was going to ask is, so we need to figure out what's the resale value, because for physical, there's multiple factors, which is the popularity of the game, the availability of the game, and then the actual market value of the game. So, considering that there is no longer any sort of physical limitation to the game, on the digital side, I'm thinking it's probably best if it would be a locked rate based on the initial selling price of the game for a trading purpose. So, what do you think about that? Like, what would you say a $60 value is like it's locked trade between like if you're going to buy a game used, you have to pay this price. That's how much this person's going to get for a copy of a game that was $60. And then it scales based on the price. And maybe there's like if a game is $5 or less, it's always $5 for a used price. If you want to buy it from another user, you're just giving the money to a user instead of that, and we're still taking a cut from it. And also, I'd want the developers to be looped in on this, and Steam is like doing like a resell something or other like policy with that, which that also sounds like it's a lot of paperwork that has to get sorted out legally, which I get is probably why some of this isn't sorted. But what do you think of that? Would you be okay with like a locked price based on the market price for doing a license exchange?
mm, maybe I feel like you should be able to set your own. Well, if it's like user to user, why wouldn't you be able to set your own price? Because like if I sell something like on eBay, like I'm able to sell that at whatever price I can get. But yeah, it just comes down to like, why would you ever buy a brand new copy of a digital game if you could buy the used copy for less? I guess some people would want to like buy it just to
Yeah,
support the publisher, but
no,
I think a lot of people would be like, this is a dollar cheaper. Why would I spend an extra dollar for something that's functionally identical?
here's my thinking, because if we're implementing the system as we've discussed so far, but someone had to buy the game new for 60,
Hmm.
and just for my example, let's say $20 is the trade price. Only the person trying to get the game used would get the benefit of being able to buy it for 60, but there's no benefit to the for $20. The person who, and it's probably would cost like 25 for like tax and the because $20 has to go into that the original buyer's wallet. So if someone buys a game for 60, they decide they're done with it and they want to trade it, and they'll trade it to someone, and the trade price is $20. That way they can't manipulate it, so there's no like money laundering type things. We're trying to cut out a bunch of like loophole.
Okay, yeah.
We're trying to cut out a
Yeah.
bunch of weird loopholes. That's why it has to be a set price, and it would be set by Steam or an agnostic scale for game based on the market pricing. There's no benefit to that person who had to spend 60 and can only resell it for 20, other than I really don't want it and I want to get some money back. So that's the whole point. But someone else, so they're like, I want to get rid of this. It'll at least get me some money back. I'll at least get $20 back into my account by giving up this license to another person. And that person paid like 20 and some tax because of that. So that's what I'm thinking is there's no incentive to try and scam the system because you cost so much more to initially buy that. And then you can only get it from someone who's willing to give up the license. So
Yeah, and if it's not that much back, then I suppose like there would be less incentive to actually sell your digital copy, and there might not be as many out there to buy.
And we already know that the large majority of the market is FOMO induced. So they just buy immediately because it, like we know multiple articles have said the first 2 weeks of a game sales are the most important, and most people buy the game in those first 2 weeks, and then that gets extended for holidays and stuff like that. So the large majority of the market doesn't wait for price drops. The portion of the market that the industry is most concerned with doesn't wait for price drops. So this is where I think that this system is just completely consumer friendly, opens up an avenue for people who may not have been willing to buy a game to buy the game, still get some transaction money from that, because let's say the game is like $25 new. That might be the exact same price, but someone is just gonna buy it from someone else because they want to get it or whatnot. And yeah, the price, if the price of the game goes down, like the new price, that affects the scaling for the resale price because it has to be lower. And then eventually, if the base,
I actually I think it shouldn't affect the scaling. I think at least not on a absolute level.
so you're
Because
saying
a lot of I mean I think the publisher should be allowed to undercut the used price because maybe well
what I'm saying is, yeah, because that then undermines the system itself of why it even exists. So you're saying, let's just go step by step. Say a $60 game has now been reduced to $40 permanently. At 60, the trade value of a license was $20. Now, you don't think that when it drops to 40, that should also go down?
if it's a permanent price cut, it should.
That's what I was saying.
But
During a sale,
I
no.
could see like a Steam sale. Like if it goes down for 30 to like 10, I wouldn't expect the used price to scale with that for that 1 or 2 weeks that it's on sale.
And that's what, yeah, no, yeah. Not for sales.
Yeah,
I meant
I think we're in
permanent
agreement
price
then.
drops.
We're in
Okay, cool.
agreement then, yeah.
If it's a sale, that should be encouraging people to buy the new copy, because at the same time, if a new person, you have to buy it new, and the only way the trade works is you have to give up a license that's attached to a user account, and there's still no profitability for that. So the companies would never have an incentive to undercut the retail price or the trade price, because it requires a user to buy it, and there's no profit for a user to buy something at the full price and then trade it at the lower price to someone to try and give that person something, other than if you had like fake credit cards and stuff like that, which maybe, but that's I don't know if that really works that way.
What about like a digital game that got delisted? Like, what's an example? Didn't like that Scott Pilgrim game that was delisted for a while, right?
That got delisted.
What if
and the Ninja Turtles game that Platinum made?
Yeah. So what if there's like a limited amount of digital copies out there? Can you have like people selling digital copies for like over retail value because there are only ever so many sold and introduced in the system? Like that would be weird, but I mean that's kind of how the market would work, I guess.
And that's the thing. I think with digital, you have to control that because if people want their licenses and things like that, we should try to control some of the abuse that the market could have in order to make it fair. It's one of those things
Yeah.
where we're talking ideals here. Obviously, the real world will probably be much crueler if they ever did these kind of things. But it would make more sense for a long-term prosperity is that people can't set their own prices. That way, Steam knows how much money it's going to get. The developers and publishers know how much their cut's going to be. They understand when they release a game at this price, this is going to happen. And if their prices ever drop, this is how the system's going to handle it. This is where they know cutoffs are going to be. I think that having the reliable math makes the business more predictable and more likely to be embraced.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where if a game gets delisted, then that means more people might trade it. But then once again, like I was saying, Steam and the developer take a cut from the transaction, so people trading around that license just brings in more money from a game without breaking any of the distribution rules or laws that have made like the license games where it's like, oh well, we can't sell, so we're not selling any new copies, but the same copies that are out in the ecosystem keep moving around and we keep making money off that. Now maybe that's another thing where you also have to, like, certain games they have to stop it because Steam isn't allowed to make money off it, and maybe since the license holders change, that means that where the money goes then also becomes a problem, and I think that's where a lot of it is. So maybe then you'd still have to do it. If a game gets delisted, it can't be traded. Also, who gets to say?
Mm-hmm.
Because if you give people a choice, if you give the companies a choice, they're not going to want their games to be listed for trade. But if they're getting a cut, they're probably more likely to go, well, I guess that's transactions, especially for single player games that are meant to be like content complete and just get patches for performance or whatever. Those ones make the most sense where you could get a recurring transaction off of people moving license around rather than that. They would say, well, I want them to buy new. But yes, we want them to buy new. However, people are more likely to buy new if they can trade some of their other licenses to have credit in their bank and they buy some of those other things. So that's where some of that works out. This, of course, is completely ignoring like the Game Pass style thing where it's like you're subscribing to a service and this money comes in. But until like you get those companies signed up on there and this whole system gets upheavaled, we're talking about something else where there can be ongoing transaction on demand or a la carte transactions rather than just the straight up service model, which is democratized because everyone pays the same price for the same amount of games, regardless which ones and how much they play.
Yeah, and that has its advantages too, both for consumers and publishers and developers.
You know what? Maybe there's a better solution overall. And Mike would be proud because we're talking about choice here. Because right now we both know that Game Pass is amazing. It's super great. What if say on Steam, you could there was a system where you pay, or any platform really could do this, to reduce because all the real point of the used games and all this is just trying to let people play more games at cheaper prices. And really, it's just about availability. People would play more games. If price wasn't an option, it would be amazing to see what people play and how people manage it. Because then it's just time. Download it, whatever, play it. Like, no data caps, whatever. It'd be neat if there was like a service where instead of having to deal with like trading around copies, it'd be another subscription service. You pay. It's almost like GameFly. What if there was like a GameFly style thing where, hey, if you pay $10 a month, you get every month you can download any 2 games, and you can, but then it's like 2 slots. You get 2 free game slots, and so you can fill your slot with a game here and a game here. You play those, and then you uninstall them, and those ones are you're rotating. You pay $10 a month for these free slots, so you can play any games you want at whatever cost. But maybe it's limited to just only 2 games a month, and that's your like 30-day thing, and you have to swap them or something like that, or you get like a slot thing. I don't know, something like that. What is that? How does that sound to you?
Is there a limit on how long you can keep the games?
I guess no, it wouldn't be a limit. I guess you'd pay for the slots and then it's like you just pay a monthly recurring fee. I think I described it poorly and I'm thinking about this on the spot.
Like a digital GameFly.
Yeah. So it'd be like on Steam. Like they're like, if you pay us $10 a month, any games on Steam, uh, or it has to be maybe a select list also because you have to make the deals with the developers and publishers, or maybe they opt in or whatnot to it, and be like, hey, you can pick from any of the eligible games, and in your free slot for 10, we'll say one slot for $10 a month. Whatever is in your slot there, that's the free game you're playing, regardless what the price is. You can hold it for as long. But if you don't want to pay additional money for the game, then you have to uninstall that one and you swap in the next one. That's how that works. But then there's no time limit. It's just paying your subscription, keeping your subscription up.
Yeah, I mean, I think like a, a subscription service ultimately will have some sort of limits. I yeah, I was there's services like at your public library that are kind of like that. They have
Mhm.
digital services where you
Hmm.
can check out a book or comic or TV show or audio thing for like 3 weeks, and you can do up to like 5 or 6 per month. Um so like that kind of digital scarcity is not like strange. I don't know. We come up with all these different ways of borrowing games. It's confusing. I mean, I wonder if any of this would really be that good. It might, this. I already am the kind of person who likes fewer options. So, maybe this wouldn't be better. For I don't know. More options are better, but sometimes they can result in people actually playing or enjoying things less. So.
Well, the goal, the way I see the goal, besides like preservation, and that was the word I was looking for. I was saying archival, but game preservation. Um, I think the goal overall for the business is to keep expanding the market, making it easier and easier for people to officially pay and play for games. And
and kind of discover new games that they
yes,
would like, even if they wouldn't, traditionally spend $60 on something where they had to take a risk not knowing if they would enjoy it.
right. And trying to open that up in a way to do that. And I think used games, that's the way most people participate in the used game market outside of the older retro market, which is a whole different thing because there's scarcity involved. With the newer market, you can like every game's available digitally. Anything that's been coming out since the PS4 days, and debatably with 360 and PS3. But ever since PS4 and Xbox One to now, games are available digitally to buy on the systems at the same day that they're released physically, pretty much. So,
Yeah.
so at this point, the system, it's about creating a system in which how do we get more people playing games sooner at a price that they're comfortable with, and that expands the market because then they're more likely to invest later. And that's where like I'm invested in multiple ways. So I'm being a hardcore enthusiast. Like I say, I use GameFly in order to try a bunch of games, and I try to use it as an honor system responsibly of like I try the game, I find out whether or not I really like it, and then I send it back. And I don't play through an entire game and then do that. The only time, like I believe I mentioned this example on there, but I played on Game Pass. I played Celeste. I played through the entire game on Game Pass just because I had it installed, and then as soon as I was done with it, I went to Steam and I bought a copy. So now some people say, why don't you just buy it in the Microsoft Store? Because I would have gotten a discount, I think, through buying it on Game Pass. I don't remember. Not all of them do, but I think you do get a discount. And I was like, because I wanted to give them the full price. Like that, I wanted to give them whatever I could to support that because I bought a legit copy. It was a good game. I enjoyed it. And that's the way it should work. Maybe, and I don't know if you'd like this, but I'll throw it out there for hypothetical because I just want to see your reaction. Ed, how would you feel if the way like Game Pass or some other service worked was if you ended up playing a game all the way through on Game Pass and you pinged the final achievement trophy or something, it charged your whole card.
I don't like where you're going with this
It
one.
and it then charged the whole price to your game, whatever the current price was, and if Game Pass, it's like with a discount.
Um, Game Pass would have to be a lot cheaper if that was the way it worked, because I don't want to pay $15 a month and also get like dinged every time I finish a game.
Yeah, yeah, that seems a bit ridiculous.
So what I mean,
I could see a future.
what if games were like pay as you go, like as you got
Or
more
arcade style.
achievements? Yeah. Well, no. As you got farther in the game, like it has an achievement for chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, and it charges you each time you hit the next chapter.
Um, I
I
think
mean that.
I don't think we could
Yeah.
do that because even my idea I just gave, which was just a weird hypothetical I wanted to spit out,
Yeah.
but
It's silly. It's
it
silly.
it
Yeah.
creates the same issue of like then the developers and publishers start trying to make games designed for that to make the most money out of it. So they'll I mean
Yeah.
it might incentivize making shorter games because they're like, oh, if they hit that final trophy or final achievement real quick, then they'll get charged. And it's like, which may actually be a good thing because then they do that, but it'll also lead us. I think it gets us into the same trap. Anytime you tie monetization to some sort of meta uh,
Metric.
meta metric or something like that, then the publishers try to force developers, or developers are incentivized to design for that to maximize profits, and then we get these situations like with the free to play market and microtransactions that we're in now. Because even though to some extent it's a great customer service for free to play games, it's then created and designed and refined to be exploitative of user habits, and it's not it's not healthy, and it's not creating a market where the content's getting better. In general, it's creating a situation where content's getting worse and people are being charged more for less. So
You know what?
yeah.
If that were like a Game Pass pricing option where it was like $15 all you can play, who cares if you finish anything, versus like $5, and if you finish a game it charges you whatever discounted, 20% off the full price like it does now. There's a trade-off there where like it could make sense for certain people who maybe never finish games versus they finish few. I mean, I guess more options aren't bad. I mean,
More options are always good. So yeah, we can always revisit some of this too. Um, but let's get to the core of used games right now. Other than the archival and retro aspect and collecting part, because if you're collecting, you're not really looking to like trade the games. So with used games, like let's talk about the people who are like they want to, they're looking for games at a cheaper price or they're trying to move them around. Um, what do you think about? We'll use this question to end the episode today. Um, for trading games, how do you think that should be handled in a way that's both user friendly and can maybe be incentivized to for the companies to let happen, other than the intrinsic value of providing good customer service? Because right now, for an example, I think a couple consoles actually let you do this, but let's say, for example, Steam has the family sharing plan or a family sharing system where if you sign in on my computer into your Ed, if you were to sign into my computer with your Steam account, and then you were to add me as a friend and then designate me as one of your 10 family members for the Steam library, and vice versa. What then happens is we both have access to each other's entire game libraries, regardless whether we've paid any money into it.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
Yeah, the stipulation is that I think it is if I'm playing a game you own from your library and you log into your account, I get up to an hour, I think, before it immediately kicks me from the game. So basically, I'm not allowed to play a Steam game that you own while you're online for too long. But they take into consideration like you might need a checkpoint or save points, etc. So it doesn't kick you immediately.
It'll like notify you.
It'll notify you, yeah. And then you have your time to try and close it down, and then I have to get off. It's not about you trying to play the same game at the same time. It's just about you're online. So that's how it currently works. And that's kind of a great system there. So if I'm not playing a Steam game, like let's say, you and I, we work different hours. So I play Steam in the morning, you play Steam at night. We'd be able to basically share libraries, and we'd never have a conflict without rare exception. So there's that. How do you think, like, what would be, what do you think should be like the system for like letting people share games? It was a big deal with the PS4 and Xbox One that people can trade discs. Like, that's a big thing with physical. Like, what do you think would be fair? that lets users be able to lend a game to someone that they know, or anyone really, and also incentivize for companies to do this and build infrastructure for it.
Digitally?
Digitally, yeah, because that's the problem to solve with physical. It's people just lend you the disc and they don't check for that stuff. They don't really care. They don't try to cross-reference a database and go like, well, your disc license is registered to this gamer tag, so you can't use it on this system. They could totally do that. They don't, luckily.
I wonder if they could on like PlayStation and Xbox. I don't know if those discs have like identifying information in them. I know Switch games do because you can redeem gold points on a game and it will only let you do that once.
I
But I
don't.
wonder if
I
I
think
don't
that
know if discs do.
I don't know if the discs have unique individual codes on them per, like, let's say Horizon Zero Dawn. I don't think every disc on Horizon Zero Dawn has an individual code. I think Horizon Zero Dawn as a SKU, like it's one universal SKU per disc. So it doesn't matter which disc as long as it's a Horizon disc. But they totally could do that. They could totally put codes on there, like a QR code type thing, onto a disc that the system scans and then locks it to the account so that disc doesn't work with another account. Or if, like we were discussing a little bit before the podcast, cartridges where you can read write information and store additional information on there. If it was like cartridges or USB keys or something like that, they could literally save user data to that to lock the key, the USB stick or the hard copy to the account and preserve that information so it can't be used or traded.
Sure.
So they could do it. Like, it's feasible. They just don't do that right now.
I think as far as digitally sharing games, I don't know if you could just do it without limits, because then why would two people buy um a copy of the game? So maybe it's they can't be playing
I
at
could
the same
explain it.
time.
I'll give you a scenario. Here's a likely scenario. I haven't actually done this with my friends, but I've put it out there and they've been accepting of it. Was, okay, we all want to play this one single player game, but it's 60, so why don't we all pay 20 for it and then we'll pass it around? That's a copy of a game that wouldn't have been sold, because if for any one of us individually, $60 was too much, but splitting it, we do buy that copy. So that's the difference between a copy being sold and no copies being sold.
Yeah, it would be nice. I just don't see where publishers have anything to benefit from that. But maybe they would sell additional copies. But
If someone knew that they could buy a copy at 60 and get $20 back later, let's just say at bare minimum, from that, maybe they're more likely to then spend it because they know they'll be getting money back, and that means the transaction becomes $40, and then they'll have $20 they know they can put towards the next purchase, and so they're more likely to purchase more games. That's exactly how the used market has been functioning for the most part. That's the only incentive is they need to get cuts,
especially if it's in like the same. Maybe you don't get $20 cash, but you get like $20 Steam credit, so you're still just spending it back on.
Right,
games.
it would have to be just store credit, not back into the credit card. Also, I was thinking, what if it's literally, either it could be like we'll stick with PlayStation as a closed platform. What if it becomes a PlayStation Plus benefit? People who are on PlayStation Plus, it could be a different tier or something. Like, you could do the trade game policy once a month. Maybe even you limit it to, like, you can trade to someone one game a month, and while that game's out, you can't trade another game to someone, but you can at least lend that to someone else who's a PlayStation Plus user. Then they're at least paying for a service. There's no extra cost involved other than maybe the enhanced membership, but that's a way for someone else who's already that's a way for PlayStation Plus members to get a benefit where, oh, I don't have to spend extra other than what I'm already paying for my services here, plus I'm already getting discounts, bundles, etc. But I can give my one friend this game, or when they buy a game, they can lend it to me for as long as deemed necessary. But once again, I'm saying, like, a limited quantity, so you can't just trade an entire library.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea either. I wonder if we're even just like pie in the sky.
Oh, we're totally pie in the sky here.
There's no way.
Totally pie in the sky, because no matter what but the thing is, there's a system to be had there where there's transactions being made that the companies can then collect on a recurring transaction that makes sense. Like, okay, you bought a game for this much. You want to give it to someone else digitally because you're done with it. You want to trade less money. You want a little bit, and because no, that person would have never bought another license or wasn't going to buy full price or whatever the price is for a new copy. We can at least extract a little bit from that because you're losing it off your account, which means you no longer played it, which means you might have to buy it again. And that person now has it, and the same thing could happen. They could trade it off to someone else, and they might have to rebuy it. So that's the game you play. And as long as the transaction is happening, and like Sony's able to take a cut, and the other company's able to take a cut from that, that's money they wouldn't have gotten otherwise because that person just never would have bought the copy of the game.
Yeah, I was just thinking of one other way they could do it is maybe there is no transferring of licenses, but you could sell back your license of a game and just get credit. Maybe maybe they don't want people giving games to each other. Maybe they'd rather it be just, hey, I don't want this anymore. I just bought Ratchet and Clank and I want another game, but I don't want to play this anymore. Give me $30 PlayStation credit and I'll use it on something else and probably spend another $30 or $40 to buy a new game, but I won't be able to play Ratchet and Clank anymore.
That's true too. That is another way to look at it. Is
that might even be simpler because then they don't have to worry about worry about transferring licenses or who gets what cut of what. That might be like, and I kind of like that idea better because then you don't have to find like a buyer. Like I don't have to like find someone to buy my copy or like it's just a way to cycle through the games.
But the thing is, Sony doesn't want to foot that bill. So like the platform then has to foot that bill from their profits. So if a bunch of people, like granted, it would stimulate the market because suddenly a bunch of people would trade in, delist a bunch of their games to get it. But Sony has to then pocket that. But you're right, it is simpler to do it that way because then Sony doesn't have to deal with any of the other companies. They're like blanket policy. If someone trades a game back in or returns it, they get a set amount back based on the current market value of it, which could, or for what they bought it, they should track it and they can have that information. So if you buy a game for 60, but you don't trade it in until it dropped in down to 40, you paid 60, so you still get 20 back. But a person who bought it at 40 only gets like 15. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and maybe that's another benefit of like a membership. Remember Nintendo for like a summer had those vouchers for digital games. Did you buy any of those?
No, because it was just
had like
the savings wasn't that much, and I didn't have enough games in the time frame because it was the time you had to use the vouchers with a certain period of time.
Yeah,
they were trying to do like this is a pre-order bonus for any game, anything, and yeah, it was a scam. No, no, actually though, Nintendo kind of does this on the eShop with the gold coins. When you buy,
they have a little bit of a cashback program.
You get a bit of a cashback, and you can use that towards the thing. So it's the same system. They're already giving you some money back, and it's just store credit. And like I've had the Super Smash Brothers game. I bought Dread. I got gold coins for that, and then I used the gold coins I had from there to buy a bunch of Mii costumes since the Ultimate DLC is all done, and I know the characters. So like I bought Doom Guy. I bought a bunch of the old ones that I wasn't really interested in before, but because I put them in my one video, I wanted to get those costumes to kind of support and celebrate them. So that's another system there where you could get some store credit from it. Nintendo's really the only one kind of doing that. PlayStation and Xbox theorize that they might do something with their achievements and trophies to help give you some store credit for the time you put into that, but it hasn't really ever panned out in a system that couldn't be super exploitative, either for user time or for the system just giving out tons of cash. So I think
there's like Game Pass and like Microsoft rewards. You can earn points on Microsoft and Xbox, I think, playing games that you can use for Xbox credit. It's not a lot, but I think and you can do like searches on Bing. There's all this Microsoft rewards. Like there's.
Yeah, I think your system actually, your idea would probably work the best because then Sony doesn't have to do up extra contracts. They're just like, we give out store credit, and then they use that store credit to buy new games, and then the other companies get more cuts. But the problem is it just cuts into Sony's bottom line, and they wouldn't like that because they have to bear the brunt of it. And what if a game? Well, that's this thing. What if people, what you call it, redeem a bunch of games? Well, I guess with it's just like gift cards at Best Buy and stuff. If people redeem a bunch of games and that money goes on cards, the money's not really spent until isn't really lost because it's still in the system. You're just letting someone come back with
And
credit.
maybe they limit it. Maybe you can only do it once a month, and maybe it's a benefit of having like PlayStation Plus, just to get you cycling through
Yeah,
more games
add more value to
and
PlayStation Plus.
yeah.
Definitely for those online services. They need to because they need to build up value to eventually let online multiplayer not be a subscription thing. Like they're really holding people hostage with that, and it's really unfortunate.
And they don't have a Game Pass equivalent, so
I mean, they have PlayStation
well,
now,
PlayStation now,
but
yeah.
it's less quality than anything else. It's just, well, this is the way we do it on PlayStation. So you just have games like really old games and streaming, which, you know what, to some extent it offers physical. There are games that are physical and digital only on there, so it's not exactly a bad system. I just, the amount of games that I've found in there, I have been meaning to subscribe to it just for the sake of having it because I could go on PlayStation and claim games. Well, not claim games, but to try games on there. It's one more system, especially since the PS5's good. And it'd be a different library than what Game Pass has. So I don't hate. It could be better. It'd be nice if Sony actually put more of its first party titles on there for local download rather than stream. But yeah, I think there needs to be a system to let users try more. I think it comes down to the customer service, like letting people be able to try more games or get to games for cheaper prices. Sales come and go. I get that they're businesses. We didn't even really talk about how free to play like factors into this and that people are just not. I think that's a product. That's a different discussion based on the
Yeah.
product, based on the merits of, limited experience games, and even that. Well, this is where we can talk about replay value because I think it's going to get into that is the multiplayer games versus single player games and the inherent replay value of video games and how that should factor into prices, the business models, etc. So I believe that's going to be our next episode's topic, if there's no disruption to the schedule. But yeah,
Yeah.
I think it'd be smart to cut it off here. Bottom line,
Yeah, we really got off topic on this, but I think we
it's
can
all
all
relevant.
agree
It's all tangential.
that having consumers have more control over their purchases, both physical and digital, is a good thing. Like if you're buying something, you should have the ability to do with it what you want to, at
Right.
least within reason.
Yeah, and like this also factors into the return policy stuff, which we didn't explicitly talk here about. And I think it's in general like there should be return policies, there should be things, or you should be at least be able to be recompensated for software to some extent when it comes to these. Like even movie theaters, the people come the old example of like if I go to a movie and watch it and hate it, like I can't get a refund. Like, well, you can go and they might not give you a refund, but they'll give you a ticket for the next free movie and you'll come in. But that's because they make money on the side for other stuff. And I think there's ways for them to make money while offering these features for quality of life, but they're just ignoring it for various reasons. Some good, no, most bad, maybe some reasonable. But yeah, this was a great discussion. I think it was super worthwhile doing this topic. We'll probably revisit it at some point in the future. Ed, thanks so much as always for being with me on the podcast.
Yeah. Sorry, yeah. I enjoy it.
Yeah,
And I hope our listeners enjoy hearing us talk about it too.
yeah,
We're a little bit of windbags, aren't we?
I mean that's the point of the podcast, right? If we weren't windbags, then we wouldn't have a show. So thank you also again to our listeners who have joined us, past, present, and future. We hope you are well and stay well, and we look forward to doing this again, to talking again next time.
Bye.